Happy New Year and welcome to what's set to be a bumper year for us Dexter fans. Original Sin is still in full swing and we've got Dexter Resurrection to look forward to in the summer. It's a good time to be a Dexter fan and a good time to tune in here. You're listening to Dissecting Dexter. I'm Gareth, coming to you from Yorkshire, England. Thanks for joining me as we wade ever deeper into Dexter's early story. If this is your first time here, thank you for giving this a try. We're spoiler-free and have fun each week, breaking down the episodes, recapping and chatting about what we saw, speculate about what's to come with listener thoughts as well as mine. We've got a really good community here, and I'd encourage anyone to chip in and drop me a line. dissectingdexter@gmail.com is the address to write to. We've got some great listener feedback about this one, and we'll get to that in a bit. First, though, we won't waste any time. Let's get stuck right into this episode. We are talking about Dexter Original Sin, Season 1, Episode 4, Fender Bender. Original air date, December 27th, 2024. Written by Nick Zayas. No relation to David, but he worked on Season 1 of Star Trek Picard, which was perhaps the weakest season. But we'll see how he gets on here. Director is Monica Raymond, directing the second of her 2 episodes of Original Sin. She's perhaps better known as an actor, having been a series regular in Chicago Fire and Lie to Me, but has also been in stuff like Chicago PD and Dark Woods. I was genuinely shocked by the opening of this episode. I did not expect the boy to be murdered, but they went there, and they didn't just go there. They suspended his corpse from a bridge, hanging it like it was a dead pheasant or something. One of the most horrific things I've seen on this show, but I'm sure shock is what they were going for, and primarily shock for Dexter himself, who is quite rightly and understandably really shaken and disturbed by it. He's upset and angry and can't quite recognise the emotions, which, well, let's face it, they'd be normal for anyone to feel. To me, it's a reminder of the impact crime scenes must have on our emergency services, not just the police. There was a fatal car crash not too far from me this week involving some young teenagers, and you can't begin to imagine what sights emergency workers were met with and the psychological impact it must have on them. Here, we see the police and other people getting on with the job, focused. What else could they do? Dexter watched the fireman carrying the boy's body, and it immediately reminded me of Harry carrying little Dexter from the container. Sure enough, the show starts inserting screaming and flashes of blood. Very, very brief flashes. You could blink and miss them. Just tiny reminders to us, perhaps, because Dexter doesn't seem to react to what might have otherwise been hints from his distant memory. Voiceover says, "Murdered children always got to me." Of course, the first person we saw Dexter kill back in the pilot was a child murderer. And Dexter says to us, back then, he says, "Never children, never kids." LeGuert is there and tries to chip in, but Spencer sends her off to another murder scene to deal with that. He makes a passive-aggressive comment about no body being worth more than another, throwing her own words back at her. Harry notices Dexter looking unsettled. I don't know if we're meant to wonder if seeing a child dead makes a connection to Dexter's distant memory, but honestly, I think he's just experiencing a regular human response to seeing something so horrible. Harry sends him to the other murder scene with an officer called Sanders, although he gets referred to as Clark later on. Someone we've not met before, but through the episode he seems like a decent guy. They develop a nice rapport. Might also mean he could die at some point. Speaking of dying, remembering the theory about Sophia last time, we joined Deb and Sophia getting ready for a day on the beach. Deb's still hoping to score points with the girls and increase her chances of being voted team captain. Deb cares, so we should care, but it's a storyline that doesn't interest me very much. However, I do like how this plotline gives her opportunity to be rebellious. We've seen signs of it in previous episodes, and it feels like she's consciously or unconsciously risking going off the rails to get her dad's attention. He's massively dropping the ball with her, but he seems at a loss to know what to do. I don't think it's rocket science, but he doesn't seem to have the headspace to work it out. He needed the truck for work, but didn't realise how much Deb was banking on having it to score points with the girls, and she's pissed off. Again. The girls go and buy some coke from Blockbusters, and I was a bit surprised when they tested the merchandise in the street, out in the open.
Dad, these feelings I have, I can't ignore them. You taught me the code to help me channel my urges. What's the point if I can't even use it?
Killing a person, it's not that simple. Once you do it, it can't be undone.
You're listening to Dissecting Dexter.
At the next murder scene, LaGuerta's assertive, as you'd expect, and there's no hint of fancying Dexter like we got in the early couple of episodes of season 1, although we know they dropped that, so I don't know why I'd even mention it here. She does make a comment about him being so young, and Dexter notices the expectation as he's the forensics representative here. He notices the faces of all the officers at the scene, and he needs to make his assessment of the scene. I like how they lingered on his visual inspection of the body, taking a moment to absorb what he sees. Young man, track marks, feminine earrings, or they look feminine, pink hot pants, perhaps someone who fits the NHI profile that we heard about the other week. We know Dexter always had a knack for analysing crime scenes, that spidey sense. He does the same here. Hints of classic Dexter, even at this early stage in his career. One guy there, not sure if he was a paramedic or from the coroner or what, probably the coroner, but he refuses to touch the body. I'm not touching that thing, he says, dehumanising the victim. He doesn't want to get AIDS, he says. I suppose 1991 was still a time when there wasn't such a wide understanding about the disease and how you can and can't catch it. Sanders gets stuck in and lifts the body with Dexter. He's a good guy, and I like that they did this together. We join Harry in records. He chats with Camilla and makes reference to making sure all mention of Dexter was removed from the Laura Moser file. It drifts into another flashback of Harry and Laura. They're picking her up to take her to do more CI stuff, and Harry ends up babysitting Brian and Dexter. Brian showing clear warning signs as he pulls tails off lizards, and this is before the container. What's his deal there? No one to teach him right from wrong? We've talked a lot over the years about nature versus nurture, and we said how the boys shared that same trauma with their mother's murder, but then Brian went into the care system while Dexter went to a loving family. Both permanently affected, but Brian totally uncontrolled, lacking the guiding father figure and a stable home. It looks like there was something there before Laura's death. She does seem to love her kids, but we've not seen anything to indicate why Brian would have a darker personality than Dexter. Was it a case of Dexter being the favourite? We saw a couple of episodes ago how she called him an angel. Was he the favourite? And Brian lacked enough attention, his basic needs from his mother not being met, and he resorted to doing bad stuff to get that attention. Little Dexter's upset, showing a more sensitive side, trying to save a lizard, and he's sad when he can't. Harry gives him a hug and Dexter hugs back. It's touching. Obviously, Harry had some familiarity with the two boys long before Laura died, so we have further indicators why Harry picked up Dexter and not Brian or both of them. This is reinforced later when we see Harry's fallen asleep reading the boys a bedtime story as Laura comes home, although it's Dexter he's laid next to. Laura's meeting was successful and she says she's now on Estrada's radar, which is good news for Harry, but that sense of impending doom, it's growing, isn't it? The body language is there between the two of them, and Laura seems more keen on something happening. Harry resists, but only for so long. That was later in the episode, of course, but getting back to Dexter, we saw him in the records room. He's obviously got lots of free time in this intern job, as he's got loads of files out on the floor. He's doing his homework for his next target, looking for who it could be. We always said that in the original series how he was able to just disappear during the day and pursue his next victim, and no one asking any questions except Dokes. Anyway, Dexter's found someone, a potential hitman for the mob. Huge list of possible murder victims, but he's always got off. Lack of evidence, etc. He talks to Harry. His anger at the boy's death, he wants to direct it at a new victim. The police are doing all they can, and Harry urges Dexter to let them sort out justice. Dexter's behaving selfishly, of course. He's got his urges, and he just wants to take them out on someone. He doesn't know how else to process these feelings and these emotions, but he's worried that doing nothing will lead to his feelings boiling over in some uncontrolled way. There are parallels with the mental health of regular people. We all need an outlet for our emotions and have to find constructive ways to do it without hurting anyone else. However, from what we've seen, Harry's tried all sorts for Dexter already, and Dexter's crying out it's not enough, it's not doing the job. Harry's being manipulated, of course, in this scene, but he's so resistant to accepting this fact. And we can understand that. No one wants their child to be a serial killer, of course. So we meet Mad Dog, and we get our first look at veteran actor Joe Pantoliano. I won't list his film credits, but you all know his face. And his list of credits is as long as your arm. Great to see him on Dexter. Mad Dog here, with a shit-eating grin. Fits the bill for the code, but Harry's worried because this guy could be a serious professional killer with decades of experience and won't be easy to take. Harry wants proof, though, before he can approve. This relationship is like, in some ways, like a hitman-handler thing. Deb interrupts them, and we hear she did make team captain, which is great, but she doesn't feel like celebrating the good news with them.
Hey, you made captain?
Dexter didn't tell you? The fuck, Dex? Do you ever think about anyone other than yourself?
Hey, come on.
No! Don't take his fucking side. If you two weren't so attached to the dick, maybe you'd actually have an idea of what was going on in my life. I can't believe you stiffed me on the truck today. Made me look like an asshole in front of all my friends.
Deborah, a child was found murdered hanging from a bridge today. So sorry you couldn't go to the beach.
Well, how the fuck was I supposed to know that? I can't compete with a dead kid.
Honey. You want something?
God!
Oh, she's too mad and hurt and feeling left out of their cosy little dad-son thing. She's so isolated, and it's no wonder she feels like rebelling. She needs something, anything, to know her dad cares about her, but all Harry can do is ask whether she's on something, like that's the most important thing right now. What a mess. Good stuff from Molly Brown there. Then we move on to some classic Dexter, researching his target, getting close to them, like he did with Ferrer last time. We know this guy may present more of a challenge, though. Dexter checks out his house, and just a thought, Dexter's pretty good at picking locks. Did Harry teach him? Why? Anyway, it was pretty funny again watching Dexter check out someone's home, using the back scratcher, picking stuff up like fingerprints wouldn't matter. We're used to older Dexter being so much more careful. He finds the evidence he needs, though. Mad Dog's next potential target, some guy about to testify against the mob. We hook up with Miami Metro, where we learn about the dead boy. He was apparently killed with an ice pick. There are some theories out there that the killer could be Brian. Not based on any spoilers, but people are running with the theory that the person in the diner was Brian from a couple of episodes ago. The ice pick obviously has a connection with an ice truck. Brian not having established much of a regular MO yet. I don't know. Time will tell, but it's certainly interesting to think about. We meet Captain Spencer's wife and son. Looks like he was more married to his job and she found someone else. There's a really nice moment when Dexter notices and sits with the son. He seems to have a nice rapport with him. Maybe communicating with kids comes more easily to him. Less complicated. I like that bit. But then we moved on to a scene that I really loved. I was so happy to see him standing there holding a pair of melons. Stop giggling at the back. A pair of melons. Stop it. A ketchup bottle. White overalls and plastic on the floor. How long has it been since we saw Dexter demonstrate blood spatter? Way too long, and this was just a delight. Everyone watching a would-be master in action. Classic Dexter again. We learn the victim was gay and a loner, and Dexter attempts to tie it to the drug-related murder from the earlier episode. I don't know if this theory of his will end up true, or just Dexter's enthusiasm for serial killers getting the better of him, and he's too hasty to tie them together. But he recognises the signs of someone who savours the kill. LaGuerta looked very impressed though, and so do the onlookers, including Masuka. Well done, Dexter. Masuka's joke about Tanya's melons was funny, followed with a full-blooded giggle. Classic Vince.
This is the Dissecting Dexter Podcast.
It doesn't matter what I do. Born in blood. Both of us.
Deb and Sophia go clubbing. Obviously very underage, but Deb's full of self-confidence here and meets a guy who's full of charm. It's the guy we saw her with in the trailer, riding in the convertible. I thought at the time he looked like a young Oscar Isaac, but maybe he's a bit more like Vincent Chase from Entourage, if you've seen that. Or maybe both if they were spliced together or had a love child. Actually, do you know, there might be a bit of Christian Camargo there too. Anyway, he's not pushy, but they hook up the next day when Deb decides to call him. She lies to Harry about staying over at Sophia's, though. I wonder if this would be her first time sleeping with someone. It's not made a big deal of, so I don't know, maybe not. Anyway, Dexter presents his evidence to Harry, and he's not happy. He knows that if this guy is who he thinks it is, he'll be way too advanced for Dexter. He'll be biting off more than he can chew, basically. Dexter manipulates Harry into agreeing and talking about the target's family. I wasn't sure if Harry would agree, but he does, perhaps knowing he could be sending Dexter to his death at worst. If Mad Dog is worth his salt, he'll have eyes in the back of his head and know some moves. I don't think Harry will sleep much tonight. Next day, Dexter's hired Mad Dog's boat for a fishing trip, presumably planning to kill him at sea and dumping the body. I wondered if it would be where he got the idea to drop the bodies in the Gulf Stream moving forward. They have a chat, and it seems like Mad Dog's talking in metaphors, although he doesn't know Dexter knows, but Dexter knows, if you get me, and picks up on his meaning. He gets a bit frosty when Dexter asks one too many questions. He'll have to learn and get better at reading conversational cues. He doesn't have privacy on the boat, though, with that family there, so he switches to Plan B, I assume it's Plan B, and takes him down in his house, giving him the good news on the back of the head with a guitar. He underestimates his prey, though, and doesn't tie him down properly before he wakes up. Definitely some naivety there, some complacency. Harry's warning was right, and Mad Dog escapes. There's an almost comical chase down the street with him in his boxer shorts. You'd reckon Dexter would have caught up, but a car gets there first. Bang! Oh dear, that's a bit messy. How long before the guy gets identified, assuming he's dead? Police go to his house, see the mess, there might be fingerprints, they look into his recent movements, trace the family on the boat, hear about this other passenger, Doug. Maybe Harry ends up having to do some fiddling there. Whatever happens, this was a mistake, and maybe Dexter will learn a very valuable lesson about not being too hasty. We've seen older Dexter take down big physical guys before, but that's with the M99, not a thump on the head. Perhaps this is where we'll see him starting to refine the MO and becoming much neater. Another good episode overall. I loved seeing Dexter's perfectly reasonable reaction, human reaction to the boy, and then we got all that classic Dexter with the blood spatter demo and scoping out Mad Dog. We've got Deb off the rails, but perhaps just doing what many teenage girls would do as they get a bit older, pushing the boundaries, taking a few risks. I wouldn't know, I've never been one. And Harry wrestling with the realisation that despite his best efforts, his son is destined to be a serial killer. What did you think?
Listener feedback.
You can get in touch in all the usual ways. I'm on Twitter at Dissect Dexter. Blue Sky, look for Dissecting Dexter. Also facebook.com/Dissecting Dexter, or good old-fashioned email, dissectingdexter@gmail.com. Like Fritz Harrell did, he says, on flashbacks from the original show, not being consistent with how things are playing on the new show. My theory is the flashbacks are from the point of view and faded memory of whoever they're about. That's why in the original show, Dexter, quote, put the blame for Nurse Mary on Harry, kind of as a way to blame Harry for giving him his first taste of blood, creating the monster he became. Thanks, Fritz. Yes, we always said Dexter was an unreliable narrator. Even the producers tell us that. Dexter maybe remembered Nurse Mary as being Harry's idea to absolve himself a bit of the responsibility. Now in Original Sin, we've seen it as it actually happened. We've got a voicemail from Chris in Scotland, recording in his own mobile studio in Glasgow city centre.
Hi Gareth. I'm really enjoying the show. I'm going to be a little bit negative towards the end of my feedback, and I'll try and keep it short. But I want the narrative to be that I really do enjoy the show. I think it's fantastic. It's certainly the highlight of my week from a viewing perspective at the moment. I'm particularly enjoying the 90s setting. I think the music's fantastic. I think the clothes and the set dressing, etc., has been really, really good. And being born in the 80s and very much a child of the 90s, the music's taken me back to old primary school discos and early secondary school discos, so that's fantastic, a nice bit of nostalgia. The 70s scenes I think are really well done as well. The camera colour filter certainly works, and it works well for the 70s period, and I think that it looks really good. It's quite rustic looking, and I'm very much a fan of when shows take the time to do that, and I think Dexter Original Sin is doing that pretty well. I liken it to Mad Men to a certain extent, another show that I quite liked, and the makeup and hairstyling on Christian Slater is excellent. You do believe that as a de-aged Christian Slater, so I've really been enjoying that. Just wanted to say that. One of the voicemails on your episode 3 feedback mentioned nitpicking, and I have to agree. We obviously are all here to dissect Dexter, pun intended, but I think if we're going to go down the route of nitpicking, we could drive ourselves insane, and it really does ruin your enjoyment, and can perhaps even ruin others' enjoyment of a show, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to slightly contradict myself towards the end, and when I'm talking about things that I'm not really liking as much, but I wouldn't say that that's nitpicking. So whoever brought that up, I can't remember the girl's name, definitely agree with that, and I'm not going to nitpick. I'm just going to switch off my brain as much as possible and take the show for what it is, because I think I've mentioned before, I'm definitely glad that we have the show. Someone else mentioned the jeopardy of the characters, and again I agree. We know where our fan favourites are going to end up ultimately, but it's the fleshing out of those characters that's the interesting part for me. The juxtaposition, I suppose, for that is that we don't know much about Bobby or Tanya or Spencer or some of the other minor characters, and it'll be fun to see where their characters go to and grow, etc. And I think the more we learn about them, the more we care about them, the more we'll feel that sort of jeopardy should something perhaps happen to one of those characters. I think someone mentioned that also, that Deb's friend could inadvertently be killed as a result of something Dexter does, and I think that would sort of narratively play into what we know about Dexter and Deborah's relationship, and that as much as Dexter cares about Deborah, it has caused her a lot of heartache throughout her life. Another thing I wanted to pick up on is someone mentioned about retconning, and again, I don't want to really go into retconning too much because it is a prequel series, and there has to be an element of retelling the story and retconning, if you will. And for me, I don't really have much of a problem with that. The Dex and Harry relationship for me is really, really interesting, and I think the writers showing Harry and Dexter having a bond before obviously what happens to Dexter's mother is really interesting to me, in the sense that it's showing you that there's a pre-made bond there. We saw him really taking time when he babysat Dexter and Brian, in particular reading the bedtime story and falling asleep beside Dexter. There's already a bond there, and there is an element of retconning there, and we see that Dexter's a really sweet child, and we're seeing that the side of Brian is that there's problems before he witnesses his mother being killed, so there's obviously issues there as well. So that's particularly interesting to me. Showing Dexter as just a cute little kid and being human, I think, is perhaps the writer's way of making the viewers feel okay about rooting for Dexter. We've obviously had this conversation before on your podcast and elsewhere, and in reality we really shouldn't be rooting for Dexter, but as viewers we love the character, and if we're really honest with ourselves, we do root for the character. So showing us this human side of Dexter as a child, and then later on in another excellent scene, which we'll talk about in a minute, I think is really, really interesting. I think it's really shown the human side of Dexter. The other scene which I thought was fantastic was the scene of Dexter and Spencer's son, when Spencer's ex-wife came in for the meeting and Dexter approached the boy. I think that's as human as we've actually seen Dexter. He was so natural, and he picked up on the social cues that Spencer's son was giving out, and he sat with him and he listened to him and engaged with him about the Sega Game Gear, which again I thought was really, really cool to see. I had one of them when I was young as well, but I thought it was a brilliant scene, and it did really show that human side of Dexter. I think you also sort of seen glimpses of that with the sort of rookie cop that spoke about his brother being shot as well, and I think that is the writer's way of showing us that Dexter is human and it is okay to root for him, and I really, really like that. I don't want this to be super, super long. There is a lot I like about the show. I do think that Spencer's son will be the next victim of the masked killer. I think it was Nick that brought up that perhaps could be Brian. That's not something that I had thought about. I was obviously suspicious about the fact that they didn't show us the killer's face. I was more leaning towards the side of masks can be more creepier than seeing a human face. Maybe that's why the killer was masked, but I can get on board with Brian being the killer. It's definitely not the cartel. It's too personal. The chopping off of the finger and hanging him for the police to find him. And I do think Spencer's son is at the very least going to be abducted, whether or not he's actually killed or not. I do think that possibly could happen though, which makes it quite personal for Spencer as well, and might lead to why we've not heard a lot about him in the other series, although he's obviously a character that probably didn't exist. But that's an interesting an interesting sort of take on it. And again, going back to the Jeopardy side of things, I think it will show that we care about him if there's that personal sort of Jeopardy there in his family. Very quickly, and I don't like to end on a negative, I'll caveat this by saying I love the show. I'm thrilled that we've got it. I'm really looking forward to it every week, as much as I'm looking forward to the podcast. The Dexter kill scene in episode 3, as much as I loved the sort of Dexter meeting his victim and scoping him out and all that entailed, and it did harken back to classic Dexter, I really hit my head against how theatrical the kill was. For this stage of Dexter's life as a serial killer, I felt that was a bit too out there. And although it was a cool visual, etc., I just felt as if that didn't really mesh well with the story that we've been told presently. But again, it's just a small thing. Patrick Gibson's doing a fantastic job as Dexter. I see him as Dexter now, and of course he's going to make his own choices and make the character his own. I do feel as if he's a wee bit too smirky towards the camera at times. I think he's doing a great job, and it's obviously a direction he's been given. I just maybe like them to lean back on that a wee bit, and maybe something will happen in Dexter's life. Harry dying will change that, and he'll go down the route of the sort of more deadpan Michael C. Hall, not giving any emotion away on his face. And again, it's unfair to compare him to Michael C. Hall, but they are playing the same character, so it is relevant. My main dislike of the show at the moment is unfortunately Deb and the Deb scenes. Nothing to do with the actress. She's doing a phenomenal job. I think she's great. I laughed out loud at Fuckosaurus Rex, and I have been enjoying her as a character, and I've been enjoying the actress. But I do find when we're cutting to scenes of her and her friend, or her and her friend out shopping, or out at the club, or Deb with this new guy, I do find myself thinking, can we get back to the Miami Metro story, or the Dexter story, or the Harry story, or a mix of all three? And that's just a personal thing, but I really am struggling a wee bit with that, and that may change. I think obviously the story with this guy that she's met at the club's obviously going to lead somewhere as well. But it's just a small, and I hate to use the word nitpicks, maybe a dislike that I've got as well. But I'm loving the show. I think episode 3's probably been the best so far, closely followed by episode 4. Loving the podcast. I've said before, it's a great accompaniment to the show itself, and it goes hand in hand for me. I look forward to the podcast as much as I look forward to the show, and I really enjoy listening to all the different voices and emails and your thoughts as well, Gareth. Just want to take this opportunity to say I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas, and I wish everybody a really happy and healthy new year, and I look forward to dissecting more Dexter with everyone into 2025. Thanks, Gareth.
Thanks very much, Chris. Kind comments about the podcast and the community we have here. That was a long one, but I played it all because you had some good theories and thoughts, some of which echo my own. I've had a couple of listener comments, actually, mentioning the length of voicemails. Not yours, just in general, and how they're sometimes a bit long for them. I don't want to discourage anyone from sending in a voicemail. Honestly, I do love to hear from you, but I do want everyone to get the most. I want everyone to get the most out of the podcast, and I wouldn't want the length of voicemails to be an issue. I'd say probably, 5 or 6 minutes is comfortable, but I think this time some of you had up to 3 episodes to talk about, so I'm fine with it. Chris, you bring up the notion of nitpicking, and it's true that podcasting about a show encourages digging into details, and we can and do sometimes get hung up on things. I hope I've been doing a good job in my recaps of not nitpicking too much. And in this particular episode, when we saw Dexter and Brian, I thought, screw it. I'm not going to let the age difference of the child actors and, how they're older than those we saw in the original series flashbacks. I'm not going to let it bother me. I'm just going with it. It's not worth spoiling my enjoyment by dwelling on it. But it's okay to acknowledge these things. They're encouraging us to compare the details by recreating moments and characters we've seen before, aren't they? So it's their fault, right? You brought up the pre-existing relationship between Harry and Dexter prior to the shipping container. I mentioned this in my recap too. I really liked how they're showing they had a familiarity and maybe even some degree of affection. We may see them spending a bit more time together in future episodes. It certainly shows why Dexter was chosen that day. It's significant for them to show us that there was something different about Brian even before Laura's murder. Animal cruelty is known as a precursor or an omen of other darker things to come, but it's not necessarily the point of no return. These boys lacked a father figure. God only knows if Joe Driscoll ever had any positive influence. Probably not, I'd guess. Laura probably did her best, but was tied to the drug business and probably did what Joe told her to do. It's not a nurturing environment for any child. You have to feel bad for them. Maybe the writers will flesh this out more as we go along. You suggested that Spencer's son could be the next victim of the child killer. This could certainly be true, and maybe another way that he could end up vacating the captain's office, paving the way for Matthews to come in. The scene of Dexter with the kid was nice and might have served two purposes. Like you, I thought it showed Dexter in a really good light, how human he was, recognising the situation and showing the boy some attention and kindness. But secondly, could it have been to introduce us to the kid, get us to sympathise and empathise with him, only to kill him later? We saw Dexter's reaction to the judge's son. How would he be if it's the child of someone he knows and has interacted with? Chris, you said that this and the nice interaction he had with Clark shows us he's human and someone we can root for. That's true. Now, I'm not going to dive back into New Blood, but just for a moment, let's allow us to compare the Dexter we saw today with the person who murdered a police officer in cold blood when cornered. Same person, but much further down the road. Just something to think about. And it's a shame to think about what he became. Obviously, we'll meet that person again soon in Resurrection. Mamoon emailed to say he's liking the Spencer-LaGuerta rivalry continuing to heat up. He thinks she treated Deb perhaps in the way she did because of how Spencer was with her. He also liked Dexter building a small relationship with the officer Clark. He thinks this is a sign of them doing what he wanted them to do, making us care more about new characters. Mamoon also points out how Dexter reflects Harry in that he had a relationship with a single mother with two kids, someone living in difficult circumstances who then dies horribly in front of her children, causing them to have crazy urges later. Thanks, Mamoon. I like that, how history can repeat itself. I don't know that I'd say Spencer's behaviour directly caused LaGuerta to be like that with Deb. Spencer had his own axe to grind with her because of her calling out the department's record. Deb hadn't done anything wrong to LaGuerta, but I do believe that LaGuerta was the sort of person where you had to earn her respect, and she didn't give that easily. Deb had a motor mouth and was impulsive, and LaGuerta wasn't like that at all, and it probably just irritated her. Moving on, Jennifer emailed with her thoughts on episode 4. She says, I was a little surprised to see that Dexter was already struggling with the death of children when he was clearly excited by the death of adults. It seems early, but that could be that he had never truly seen a dead child until this. The officer talking to him really seemed to help him. I also liked the way that he made the person on the beach human at a time when the AIDS crisis was at its peak, and drug users fit into that category. This was a great way to show the victim mattered. I would never have thought from the way Debbie's portrayed in OG Dexter that she was a partier, but here we are. Harry and Camilla conspiring to hide evidence was something I hadn't expected. I also didn't see Harry babysitting young Brian and Dexter, and then sleeping with Laura Moser. Crazy. The origins of Dex and his ways of figuring out how someone was killed based on blood spatter. I really love this part. And then Dexter already picking a new victim. It seems he's starting out with a bang. Also very, very lacking in making sure he doesn't get caught. That kill went so wrong. What will the consequences be? Did someone see him? On the whole, I really like the episode. Not sure which is my favourite yet, but I'm absolutely loving the journey into Dexter territory. Thanks, Jennifer. I also like Dexter and Officer Clark treating the body with the respect it deserved. Elsewhere, we see law enforcement breaking bad, Harry and Camilla conspiring to tamper with evidence. We know why, but it doesn't make it right. And he is starting with a bang, isn't he? These quick-fire kills, or attempted kills. He's not wasting time, is he? Last week, some of us, myself included, queried where Dexter learned his fighting skills. He was far more able than just being a brawler, particularly judging by that leg sweep. Thanks to listeners Andrea and Barbara, both got in touch to remind me of a conversation between Dexter and Dokes back in the day, Season 2. Dokes had looked into his history and saw that he did advanced jiu-jitsu at college. Dexter responded about it being an easy credit, but that would certainly explain some of his fighting skills. He's still a pretty slight guy physically, though, and doesn't have the bulk to go up against someone heftier. And these last 2 kills, or one actual and one attempted, he's been matched or outmatched physically, and I think we can see how this realisation may lead him to find a new method of takedown. Andrea went on to say she's fine with the creative liberties that we've picked on, but she'll never forgive the M99 ketamine controversy from New Blood. Here's Travis.
Gareth, in your time of need, I let you down. Showtime, they got the wackiest schedule over the holiday season. Everyone's confused. No one knows who to turn to know what the hell's going on. And I let you down, dude. I didn't record any feedback for those last 2 episodes. But you know what? I have a few things to say, but about not 1, not 2, but 3 episodes of Dexter Original Sin. I know everybody has things to say about Hot Young LaGuardia. Everybody's going to have things to say about Joey Pantoliano.
Lenny!
Everyone has already said things about young Rudy in the diner. I agree. I mean, I thought the same thought. I think that's going to be him, no doubt. But I just wanted to point out small little details I noticed. When I watch this show, it's a great thing I do it alone because I have to pause and I'm looking and I'm obsessing over little details. So I'll just point out a few little small details I noticed that are interesting to perhaps only me. This episode we're dealing with the Estrada case, and we see like the giant crime board of all the Estrada network. We don't see any of the names of the people connected to Estrada from the original series on this board. Of course, that's not counting Estrada himself, whom Dexter killed in season 8. In season 2, Dexter killed Santos Jimenez, who was like the chainsaw man of the whole operation. We don't see that name on the board. We don't see Juan Pablo Aliso on the board. That's another name who Dexter wanted to kill, but he was already in prison by the time Dexter discovered him. We do see Alfredo Ruiz and Ernesto Silva, but those aren't from the original series, so I don't really have anything to say about that. We see Joe Driscoll, the young Joe Driscoll. Now, in the original series, when Rudy kills Dexter's biological father, then Rudy comes over and helps Dexter clean it all up. I'm sure we all remember that. And Rudy makes the comment that like there's nothing about this guy's life from before 1976. It's like his life began at 30. And I'm like, my God, if that guy wasn't even supposed to be 30 when we saw him in that scene, woo, what a rough life. Kids, do not do drugs. You stay in school and eat those vegetables because, brother, man, that was a hard 27 that guy was looking. I also noticed they gave him long sleeves for his entire scene because they didn't want to have to get the tattoo, the fake spider tattoo on his arm like they did in the original show. That's too much work. Harry also makes a comment like, "You're going away for a long time, buddy." And apparently he didn't, because, I mean, he was selling felony amounts of narcotics. And man, he got 3 years in prison. He got out and got clean. And by 76, he owned this house down south from Miami. Well, I guess you can't get much more south from Miami. Never mind. North of Miami. The most interesting detail that I liked about the episodes 2 and 3 was on Dexter's laminate. We see his signature, we see his handwriting, and it's just so neat. It looks like something you'd see on a candle at Bed Bath & Beyond, like "Slice by Dexter" or something. It's the most like corporate font-looking handwriting, and I searched online for way longer than I'd like to admit to find that perfect handwriting. And I found so many that are like very nearly the same exact font, but just slight differences. And so they edited something. So props to them for doing that. But the date he got his laminate was May 16th, 1991. Now I had to look at this. I'm not wild like that. I had to look up what day of the week was it. That was a Thursday, which works out really good because we see Dexter cooking dinner that night, and Dexter's cooking breakfast for dinner. In the original show, there's a scene where Deb is talking to Dokes in Return to Sender from the first season. And she just casually mentions like, "Oh, Thursday nights was pancake night at my house, a Morgan family tradition." And so, hey, very cool that lined up. I don't believe for a nanosecond that was intentional. We got to make sure it's Thursday today. But it's a happy accident that the day Dexter's cooking breakfast for dinner is the same day Deb said, "Oh, we always did that on Thursday." Within the episode, just a small thing I think is interesting. Dexter and Batista go out to get drinks on Tuesday night, and we know it's Tuesday because he mentions every Tuesday we do a shot in Renee's memory. And then the very next day, Batista's hungover from the night before, and Harry is interviewing this woman of dubious honor. And he mentions that it's Thursday. And I'm like, Thursday? What the hell? How long was that? Batista was on. He missed a whole day? It's what happened to Wednesday? I sure hope somebody got fired for that blunder, Gareth. Like you, I also thought that the boys playing young Biney and Dexter were too huge. Like, my Lord, he's not even supposed to be 2 years old at that point. And my man looks like he's ready to be point guard for the Miami Heat. What are they feeding these kids? Another dumb detail I noticed was in the third episode when Dexter's cooking, there's some Cuban music playing, and it's a song called Tu Mi Corazón. It's the one that's like, Tu, tu. Forgive my Spanish. They already used that song in the show. In season 3, episode 2, Finding Freebo. That's a song they used when Anton is playing with his band up on stage. It's that same song. In fact, I think to me, it sounds like it's even the same exact recording. I'm not sure that's period accurate to 91, but I guess I won't stake my reputation on that claim. I thought it was a little strange. It made me go, when Harry's encouraging Dexter, who's 20, probably nearly 21, to date Deb's horny friend, the minor, who's still in high school. Like, he was actively encouraging, like, hey, go for it, buddy. Hell yeah, dude, she's into you, brother. Like, Harry, dude, she's a child.
On Chris Hansen.
Speaking of Harry, we know from the original show, he was supposedly something of a player. He was kind of like sexually involved with many women, maybe many CIs, right? And, well, where are those girls? He's kind of looking like a very virtuous man up until episode 4. Where are these girls? Harry, come on, brother. We want to see, we know the deets. Small detail I noticed, so small. Dexter's buying earrings at Limited 2, and the girl has a name tag that says Hannah on it. Oh shit, dude, maybe that's Hannah's origin. Dude, maybe, are they planning that? Dude, young Hannah? Oh, finally, dude. Finally! One tiny thing I'll say about LaGuardia, and I have really nothing to say bad at all. Just an observation is, remember in season 1, they were setting up a story that LaGuardia was all hot and horny for Dexter. Those first 3 episodes, she was flirty with Dexter, and she was really into him, and Dexter made comments about that and how he didn't like it. And they seem to be kind of just retconning that out of existence. I don't think we're going to see young, hot, horny LaGuardia. Not for Dexter. I think they're just going to pretend like that didn't happen, if they remember it even happened at all. As far as the episode 4 Fender Bender goes, I have 2 things to say. One, I don't like the character assassination of my man Biney. Young Biney. They're making him a little pulling. First of all, where's he get all these lizards from, man? Who's got 38 lizards laying around? And he's just pulling the tails off of them, making it rain lizard tails. Like, not my Biney. My Biney's a perfect little angel. And I'm not talking about Batista. I'm talking about the saintly kind. My Biney bandages his brother's knee up when he falls off the skateboard. My Biney hugs his brother. This Biney's a little brat pulling lizard tails. Well, I don't know where my brother is. Fuck you. No, yeah, that ain't my Biney. There's been I got to call the police. We need to report a body snatching because that's not my Biney. I won't stand for this, Gareth. So finally, I'll just wrap up by saying just kind of some observations in terms of I almost feel like the show could work without voiceover at all. The way it's filmed, how sparing Michael C. Hall's voice is even used, it almost feels like we don't even need the voiceover. Dexter's kind of giving us everything with his eyes, and all the flashbacks are Harry-centric, and I don't know. That's just a thought. But then one of the thoughts is I'm still waiting on something to happen with Sarah Michelle Gellar, man. They cast her. They got her in this thing, and man, she's got the most nothing part. The most day player part is just generic boss at the precinct, right? Dexter, bag this up. And she says, those great lines like, today's the first day of the rest of your life. Blood never lies. They didn't need someone with a name like Sarah Michelle Gellar to do that. Anyway, Gareth, I love you, brother. Stay safe.
Oh, thanks, mate. Right back at you. Hashtag not my Biney seems to be the takeaway from that. I hope we see a little brotherly compassion from Brian at some point. Just something to show there's humanity there and he wasn't just born dark. Because I wouldn't buy that. I've somewhat hung my hat on the whole nature versus nurture thing. Some excellent Dexter detail in your message. I had to look up who Chris Hansen is, though. Good point about Harry encouraging 20-year-old Dexter to date a minor. I'd not dug into the rogues gallery on the police board with all the cartel guys, but I'm grateful you've reminded us of some of the names. We may hear about some of them in the next few weeks. You had so many details here, I can't comment on all of them, but you also remembered LaGuerta giving Dexter the eye back in season 1. I agree. I don't think we'll ever hear mention of that again. They obviously decided it was a bad idea and just dropped it, and it's for the best. Your comment about Sarah Michelle Gellar is really well made. Big name, but unimportant part so far. There has to be more in store. She surely wouldn't have signed up for this show just to be generic boss. Maybe she gets abducted by our masked killer. If it is Brian, maybe he's striking at someone closer to Dexter to see how he responds. Let's assume there's at least something to come for her and look forward to seeing what it is. Thanks again, Travis. Finally, let's hear from Nick, who emailed in with this. He says, I think this was a really great episode because it recontextualised Dexter's dramatic escalation that we discussed last week. Now that he has the green light from Harry, he's letting his eagerness and confidence get the best of him, as young folks often do. And we finally see the fallout of that at the end of this episode. Seeing him deal with the Mad Dog debacle next week is likely going to change a lot about the way he operates and bring him that much closer to being the neat monster that we all remember. I also really enjoyed all of the classic Miami Metro dynamics in play in this episode. The Jimmy Powell crime scene at the beginning was disturbing and a really neat way to highlight Dexter's aversion to harming children. That was a key piece of information that helped endear the character to the audience right out of the gate in episode 1 of the original series, so I hope it has the same effect for any newbies who are jumping into the show with Original Sin. I also loved seeing Dexter take the lead on a crime scene all on his own. It gave him some welcome screen time with LaGuerta, and it kind of reminded me of his big forensic moment in episode 7 of New Blood, but at the opposite end of the experience spectrum. Seeing the coroner refuse to touch the body because the victim was gay was awful, but it was a common misconception in the 90s and a great opportunity to let Dexter's buried humanity shine once again. Seeing him and Officer Sanders jump into action to move the body onto the stretcher was really touching. I wanted to keep this short, so I'll just plug my full review on Dexter Daily and leave you with a final thought. I've heard a lot of backlash against Deb's portrayal and how it differs from what we saw briefly in the original series, and I wanted to just point something out. The Deb that we saw in the original series flashbacks was younger, around 15 I think. I think this would go a long way in explaining the differences in personality. High school-age kids can go through rebellious phases that have dramatic impacts on their personalities, and the neglect that she's obviously feeling from her father is only making it worse. So with that in mind, I'm not finding this portrayal to be unusual. She loves her dad and wants to feel noticed and appreciated, but he's dropping the ball. He clearly wants to be there for her, but Dexter's situation is really starting to feel insurmountable. Thanks so much, Nick. Always good to hear from you, and a voice of reason in the community. Anyone listening who hasn't read your full-length reviews, I urge them to check them out on dexterdaily.com. Nick, I'm glad to hear you sticking up for Deb. She's received some criticism both as a character and Molly Brown herself. I really like her. I think her behaviour is completely understandable for the reasons you outline. Her relationship with Harry hanging on by the thinnest of threads. Plenty of teenagers can reinvent themselves, adopt a new style, break out socially. It happens. This is all quite believable in the show. But even if the writers have simply retconned the character, do you know what? I'm okay with that too. Decisions had to be made when they produced this show. Someone else mentioned Deb too. Chris, was it? I must admit that I agree. When we see them out buying sunglasses and stuff, I do wish we'd hurry up and get back to other things. Thanks, everyone. Your support with feedback each week is great. And if anyone would like to support the podcast in other ways, you could leave a nice 5-star review on your podcast app of choice, or who knows, even go a step further and maybe subscribe on Patreon for anything from £1 a month. My sincere thanks go to those who already do, and the support really helps with the podcast running costs. Patreon.com/dissectingdexter is the place to go for that if you'd like to chip in. Okay, that's it for this week. I'll hurry and get this out tonight ahead of episode 5 dropping tomorrow, and we'll be back dissecting some more new Dexter next week. Thank you all for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.